Director Flavio Pedota brings us Infección, or that is the English translation of this Venezuelan 2019 movie, which I think is just Infection in Spanish, but I'm not quite sure how you pronounce that, so I'm not even going to try. So this is a 2019 movie, so made obviously before the COVID pandemic, but ironically there is actually quite a lot of parallels to kind of COVID-19 in some ways, despite them obviously not knowing this was going to be around the corner. Before we get into the story, I have to say the reason why I got this movie is I thought the image on this UK DVD was one of the most haunting kind of zombie images that I have seen, with the burnt out corpses kind of like wandering this wasteland. I thought, oh, that is some good imagery there. I'm not an idiot. I know that these kind of covers are nothing like their films, but it sold me anyway. But what is actually the film all about? Well, let me tell you, this is kind of the Venezuelan equivalent of 28 Days Later. I was actually surprised the scale of this movie. It is somewhat of a kind of higher production than I was expecting. Having watched many kind of low budget zombie movies, you know, they kind of tend to be kind of, a lot of the time, quick, easy to make with minimal kind of extras and kind of set design. This one actually has a little bit of scale to it. Now, the plot follows the kind of the early days of this kind of zombie style infection, but it's kind of not undead. Like I said, it's more like the kind of 28 days kind of rage style virus, and within the movie we actually learn it's kind of derived from rabies, like a mutation of rabies. And we primarily focus on this doctor called Aaran, who's essentially has his young son is being looked after by his grandparents, who is kind of some distance away, right when this kind of infection hits. And he and a kind of a small group of survivors are having to traverse the landscape, trying to find both safe haven and also trying to reach Adam's son. Along the way we have a variety of different kind of obstacles, including these rage-filled zombie-type creatures, along with the kind of the worst of humanity that these kind of disasters tend to kind of bring out. So that's your kind of your basic kind of setup. Let's talk about what I think works in this movie. So as I've mentioned, the main thing I was kind of surprised about this movie is the scale of it. Now, had this been like an American or maybe an English movie, I think you would have probably heard more about it, and maybe it would be a bit more of a higher profile film, because it looks like it has had a reasonable amount of budget, production value in it, because, you know, we get large scale kind of zombie attacks with lots of kind of like different kind of you know, sets, location shooting, you know, burned out cars littered on the kind of the landscape, things like this. The VFX are kind of up to a good standard. So it actually looks like it has a very kind of high production value, you know, for a kind of a horror movie. Apparently this is the first zombie movie to be made in Venezuela. It is actually banned in Venezuela because it does have some commentary on their kind of government system there, and you could argue that this is kind of almost a metaphor, so to speak, for some troubles that they might have in that country. But nonetheless, I think the quality of the production is actually pretty high. It's mostly spoken in Spanish, being a Venezuelan movie, but there are a few lines here and there that are spoken in English, because we do actually have an Australian character, and she speaks in kind of English, and obviously the other character speaks English to her. But it's mainly kind of obviously spoken in kind of Spanish language. But on the kind of the acting and stuff, I've got to be honest with you, I thought it was all pretty good. I think everyone here does a pretty good job. We have some sort of solid kind of like character work, for example. You know, our doctor, our main character, Adam, you know, his main motivation is he wants to try to find his son. But him as a doctor, as a kind of a medical professional, feels like obliged to try and help people where he can. And this often kind of delays him in his kind of quest to kind of try and find his son. His relationship with his kind of friend and neighbour, who they kind of like become a kind of a little bit of a zombie busting duo, so to speak, I thought was very good. And we get a few kind of characters kind of like cycling in and out here and there as well. Which, like, I've got to be honest, I thought the acting was all pretty good. I mean, sometimes I find it hard to judge non-English speaking roles, because you never really know how they're kind of the emoting is matched to what I'm reading. But for the most part here, I thought the acting here was all pretty good. One thing I liked about this movie as well is I think zombie movies, because there's such a kind of like proliferation of them these days, they tend to be much and muchness, and you don't really get that sense of dread or fear or kind of like anguish. But this one, I've got to say, because it kind of follows more of a 28 Days Later template, you have a sense of impending danger. You feel like these infected are kind of like dangerous, and you'll get that kind of that same kind of anxious feeling as you did when you were watching movies like kind of 28 Days Later, and I guess the more recent Sadness was kind of a similar kind of thing. Although this movie is not as kind of gratuitous or graphic as the aforementioned kind of Sadness. You know, it's a pretty well paced movie as well. You know, it has a variety of different kind of action beats, different kind of dangerous kind of situations as the kind of the film progresses. And I think you do feel genuinely kind of quite bad when characters die, because, you know, we meet a variety of protagonist kind of characters along the way, and you want them to survive, you want them to be able to succeed, and they don't always make it, and then you kind of feel, damn, I kind of like that character, or I thought they might join the group, and that kind of stuff, which I think means the movie is bringing you along for the ride. It's kind of getting you invested in these kind of characters, and as a story beat goes, you know, and we're going to come on to this again, it's somewhat kind of what you've seen before, but nonetheless, I still think the story was somewhat satisfying. You know, we feel the story actually has a 3-act structure here. It has a beginning, it has a second act, and it has obviously the final act as well. And I think the story structure within this movie is a great example of a well kind of told story. Yes, the story isn't original. We're going to come on to that, but you know, it's a demonstration of how to make a good kind of like narrative structure, at least. So maybe what doesn't work in the movie, as I've kind of mentioned, yes, with zombie movies, it's a little bit like shark movies. There's only so many permutations you can really do. And although I think this movie is well made, it doesn't really try to invent the genre, really. It is more of the same, albeit it's a well done example of more of the same, but it isn't going to do anything new. Once in a while you find a zombie movie, and I like to use the example of It Stains the Sand Red, which had a kind of a unique hook to a kind of a zombie movie, you know. And there are other examples as well, but this one doesn't really deviate from what has worked before, a tried and tested kind of zombie apocalypse style kind of story, very similar to 28 Days Later. So originality, yeah, it's not all there. One thing that did kind of I find a little bit confusing is some of the editing in this movie. This movie will kind of flit between, it mainly focuses on our main character Adam, but every so often it will flip to other characters, and it does it in a way where you're thinking, who is this person? Who am I looking at? It's certainly in the first act of the movie and some way into the second, it will flit over to kind of other characters, but you're thinking, who is this person? I mean, there's a scene, for example, where we see a woman getting on a plane, and I was like, who is this? Is this his wife? And I'm like, I don't really know who that is. It's like, so some of the editing here I felt could have been a little better, because it ends up being a little bit of a mix. And for example, musical kind of like, the music sort of carries over into the different scenes, thinking, and it feels a little bit kind of jarring here and there. So, you know, there is that on a kind of a technical level, but that really is the only kind of thing I would say on a technical basis. Other than that, I've got to say, I thought it was pretty strong in terms of kind of technical ability and things like this. I mean, the only other kind of niggle I would say is there's sequences here, and I find this a lot with zombie films, is that we're in the middle of nowhere, like in the middle of the woods, yet there seems to be crowds of zombies walking around. I'm thinking, why are they there? You know, I've been out in the woods plenty of times, there's no bugger around. Why would zombies be there? You know, I can maybe get, you might have one or two of people walking around, but crowds of zombies, I just don't know why they would be in these very rural areas. I mean, I can understand the cities, but it's kind of like, well, we'll film out in the woods, and, you know, we'll have lots of zombies, and it looks cool, but it's kind of, I think, why is there loads of zombies in the woods? You know, what are they doing there? Surely they're attracted to food source, other humans, cities where they kind of would, you know, would have resided before they got turned, etc., etc. So it does fall into a few kind of like tried and tested kind of cliches and things like this. you know, and we get the kind of the bad humans and stuff which kind of take advantage, and I was like, you know, again, you feel like it's treading familiar ground to a certain degree. But I have to say, I was actually quite impressed with this movie. For a sort of straight to, you know, DVD, VOD movie with no kind of fanfare, I was kind of, my expectations were relatively low, but I was pleased to say this one was actually quite a decent zombie movie. Yeah, it's not going to break the mould in any particular way, you're not going to felt you've watched anything fresh, but if you do like zombie movies, this is a decent kind of addition to the genre that will give you what you expect, and you'll enjoy it if you are expecting, you know, a tried and tested style zombie movie. So I'll give this one a 7 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.